The desert wind whipped across the sacred ground, carrying the scent of sage and the low, steady heartbeat of the drums. Tonight was the night. The mating ceremony. Celine hid in the shadows of an ancient cottonwood, her hands trembling. The simple buckskin dress felt like a costume, marking her for what she was, an outsider. Her emerald eyes, a stark contrast to the deep brown of her Apache sisters, watched the firelight dance. She had lived here for 15 years, ever since Chief Cochetta's scouts found a 7-year-old girl with hair like spun gold, the sole survivor of an attack. The chief's wife, Ayana, had raised Celine as her own, but she never truly belonged. Tonight, that feeling was a physical weight on her chest. The unmarried women of the tribe, dressed in their finest, moved with a grace Celine could only dream of. Their beadwork shimmered, their silver jewelry sang with every step. They were preparing for the dance that would decide their entire lives. "You should not watch from the shadows," a kind voice whispered behind her. It was Ayana, her adoptive mother, her face etched with concern. "I belong in the shadows, Shima," Celine replied, the Apache word for mother feeling like a lie on her tongue. "This ceremony is not for me." Ayana's eyes flashed. "Your heart beats with Apache blood, even if your skin does not show it." Before Celine could answer, the drums grew louder. The warriors had formed a circle around the great fire. Their bodies were painted with the stories of their ancestors. Eagle feathers adorned their long black hair, and among them, one stood apart. Nakai. He was the undisputed leader of the warriors, a man whose presence was a force of nature. He was nearly 6.5 feet tall, a mountain of muscle carved from the harsh desert itself. Tattoos snaked across his chest and arms, telling tales of victory and spiritual power. His face was perfect, all high cheekbones and a jawline that spoke of unbreakable will. His eyes were like polished obsidian, and they seemed to see straight into your soul. Around his neck hung a single, massive bear claw, a trophy from his first solo hunt, the symbol of his power. Celine couldn't look away. She had watched him for years, admiring his strength, his wisdom, his gentleness with the tribe's children. He was everything an Apache warrior should be, and everything she could never have. The ceremony began. The elders chanted, their voices calling to the mountain spirits. The unmarried women stepped forward, beginning their courtship dance. Celine watched Etel, the chief's niece, the most desired woman in the tribe. She moved like liquid fire, her raven black hair a hypnotic swirl in the flickering light. Everyone knew who Nakai would choose. Etel was Apache royalty. Her children would carry the bloodline of chiefs. It was what everyone expected. It was what made sense. Warriors began to step forward, choosing their mates, presenting gifts of horses and handcrafted jewelry. Celine's heart clenched. Any moment now, Nakai would step forward. He would walk to Etil. He would claim her. But then something strange happened. Nakai's obsidian eyes swept across the circle of dancing women. He looked at each one, his gaze lingering for a moment before moving on. He looked right past Etil. Confusion flickered across Etil's beautiful face. The air grew tense. The dancers faltered. Something was wrong. Then Nakai's gaze moved beyond the circle. It swept over the crowd, past the elders, past the other warriors. His eyes found Celine, hidden in the shadows. Her breath caught in her throat. The world fell away. The drums, the chants, the fire, it all disappeared. There was only the electric, undeniable connection between them, a current of energy that crossed the distance and struck her like lightning. Without breaking eye contact, Nakai began to walk. He wasn't walking toward the circle of eligible women. He wasn't walking toward Etil, who now stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. He was walking straight toward the shadows, straight toward Celine. Whispers erupted through the crowd like wildfire. Shock, disapproval, a dangerous buzzing curiosity. What was he doing? Had he lost his mind? Nakai didn't seem to notice. He moved with the fluid grace of a stalking panther, his eyes locked on the one woman who was never supposed to be chosen. He stopped right in front of her. Celine had to crane her neck to look up into his face. His eyes held a depth she had never seen before. Desire, yes, but something more. Destiny. She, he said. His voice was a low rumble, but it carried across the suddenly silent clearing. My woman, the Apache words directed at her, sent a shockwave through Celine's body and the entire tribe. He reached up. With a slow, deliberate movement, he lifted the bear claw pendant from his own neck. It was his most prized possession, the symbol of his manhood, his first kill, his very spirit. He placed the leather cord over Celine's head. The weight of the claw settled against her collarbone. It felt heavy and strangely cold. I choose you, Nakai declared, his voice ringing with power, loud enough for every man, woman, and child to hear. You are mine, as I am yours, under the eyes of the spirits and the blessing of our ancestors. Celine's world spun. This couldn't be happening. She was the outsider, the ghost, the white girl raised on pity. But when she looked into Nakai's eyes, she saw no pity. She saw a fierce, burning possessiveness that buckled her knees. I, I don't understand, she whispered. His hand, rough and calloused, came up to cup her cheek. You will, he promised. He took her hand and led her from the shadows toward the center of the ceremonial ground. She saw Ayana's face, a mixture of pride and deep worry. She saw Chief Cochetta, his expression unreadable, thoughtful, and she saw Idil. The look on Idil's face was not just shock or hurt. It was pure, distilled hatred. It was a promise of pain to come. Celine was no longer the invisible girl in the shadows. She was the woman chosen by the Alpha, claimed in front of everyone, marked as his. And as the drums began their rhythm once more, she felt the cold weight of the bare claw against her skin and knew, with chilling certainty, her life was over. Something far more dangerous had just begun. The morning sun did little to warm the chilling silence of the Apache settlement. Celine emerged from Nakai's lodge, the bear claw pendant a constant, heavy reminder of the impossible choice he had made. He had led her from the fire to his dwelling, their union sealed in the eyes of the tribe. But there had been no celebration, only the weight of 1,000 disapproving stares. She had expected whispers, insults, maybe even violence. What she got was worse, a deafening silence. Conversation stopped the moment she came near. People averted their eyes as if looking at her might bring a curse upon them. It was like she was a ghost haunting her own home. I. Nakai's voice from behind her made her jump. She turned. He was magnificent, even in his simple daily buckskins. He carried himself with a quiet power that seemed to bend the air around him. The council wishes to speak with you, he said. His obsidian eyes searched her face, but she could read nothing in them. Chief Cochetta has called a meeting. Her heart sank. Of course, the formal challenge. The moment they would demand he cast her aside. What will they ask? She whispered. He stepped closer, his large hands framing her face with a gentleness that surprised her. They will ask why I chose a pale skin over a true daughter of the tribe. They will question if you can bear strong sons to honor our bloodline. The words were blunt, brutal, duties she had never imagined, expectations she could never meet. And what will you tell them? His thumb traced her cheekbone, a flicker of something raw in his eyes. I will tell them the truth, that the Spirit sent me a vision of the woman who would complete my soul, that I have watched you for years, seen your courage, your compassion, that my heart could no longer deny what it has always known. His voice dropped to a whisper. I have watched you every day, Celine, wanting what I thought I could never have. Before she could process his words, footsteps crunched nearby. They stepped apart. It was Etil. Her beautiful face was twisted into a mask of pure fury. So the great Nakai's chosen mate emerges, she spat, her voice dripping venom. Tell me, Bilagana, how does it feel to steal what was never meant for you? The slur, the Apache word for white person, spoken with such contempt, struck Celine like a slap. Nakai moved like lightning, placing his body between them. A low growl rumbled in his chest. You will not speak to my woman with disrespect, he warned. Idil let out a bitter, sharp laugh. Your woman? She is a pale shadow, Nakai. She will bear you weak, cursed children. You have dishonored us all. Enough! The voice of Chief Cochetta cut through the tension. He approached, followed by several council members, their faces grim. Itil, your pain is understood, but your words are poison. Itil bowed her head, her eyes still blazing. Forgive me, uncle. The chief nodded, then turned to Celine and Nakai. The council waits. It is time. But as Nakai led her toward the council lodge, he leaned in close, his voice a barely audible whisper. Do not speak unless you are spoken to. Let me handle this. His tone wasn't protective. It was a command, a warning, and it sent a new chill down her spine. The man who claimed to have watched her for years suddenly felt like a stranger. The council lodge was silent as they entered. Every elder, every respected warrior was there. They weren't just judging Nakai's choice. They were judging her. Nakai, son of Manuelito, Chief Cochetta began, you have made a choice that has shaken the heart of our people. Speak. Nakai stood. I went to the desert to seek guidance, he said, his voice powerful. I prayed for a mate who would strengthen our tribe. The spirit sent me a vision, a white eagle, soaring over our sacred mountains, fierce and protective. Murmurs rippled through the lodge. The white eagle was a powerful symbol. When I saw Celine, Nakai continued, I understood. Her skin may be white, but her heart is Apache. The spirits chose her. It was a good story, a powerful one. But then Itil, who had no right to be in the lodge, stepped forward from the entrance. The spirit spoke to me as well, elders, she cried out. Everyone turned. This was a shocking breach of protocol. They showed me a vision, not of a white eagle, but of a coyote, Itil said, her voice ringing with conviction. A trickster spirit, wearing the skin of a sheep, come to lead our greatest warrior to ruin. A gasp went through the room. Coyote was a spirit of chaos, of bad omens. This woman is a curse. Itil pointed a trembling finger at Celine. Since she came to us, the hunts have been harder, the winters colder. She carries a darkness with her. Elder Geronimo, the oldest of the council, leaned forward. His ancient eyes studied Celine. Child, you have heard the accusations. What do you say? This was it, her moment. But Nakai's warning echoed in her ears. He had told her not to speak. Why? Was he testing her, or was he setting a trap? She looked at him, searching for a sign, but his face was an unreadable mask of stone. He offered no help, no comfort. He just stood there, watching, waiting. Celine realized with a sickening lurch that she was completely, utterly alone. Celine's mind raced. Nakai's warning warred with the elder's direct question. To remain silent would be to admit guilt. To speak would be to defy the man who had claimed her. She took a breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had to trust herself. Honored elders, she began, her voice shaking but clear. I am not a curse. My blood may not carry the songs of your ancestors, but for 15 years my heart has beaten with an Apache rhythm. She touched the bare claw at her throat. I do not know why Nakai chose me. I do not know what visions the spirit sent. I only know this. I love this tribe. I love its people. And I would rather die than bring harm to any of you. Her words hung in the silence. It wasn't a denial. It was a simple, raw plea. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Elder Geronimo smiled, a rare sight on his weathered face. The spirits work in strange ways, and sometimes the heart speaks more truth than any vision. Chief Cochetta stood. The council accepts Nakai's choice, he declared. A wave of relief so intense it nearly buckled Celine's knees washed over her. But as she looked around, she saw Itil's face, contorted with rage, and she saw something else that was even more disturbing. Several warriors, men loyal to Itil's family, were watching Nakai not with respect, but with cold, hard anger. His choice hadn't just angered a spurned woman, it had created a fracture in the tribe's power structure. As they left the lodge, Nakai's hand found hers. You spoke well, was all he said. Why did you tell me to be silent? She asked, her voice tight. His jaw tightened. Because words can be twisted. I needed to see what was in their hearts, not what they could pull from your tongue. The explanation felt hollow, calculated. That night in their lodge, the distance between them felt like a canyon. He didn't come to their shared bed. Instead, he laid his furs on the ground near the entrance, his back to her, like a guard. Nakai, she whispered into the darkness. You are safe, he said, his voice flat. Sleep. Safe from what? The question screamed in her mind. Sleep wouldn't come. She lay there, her mind replaying every strange detail. The coldness of the bear claw, Nakai's cryptic behavior, Edel's accusation of a curse. She reached up and touched the pendant. Her fingers traced its smooth, worn surface. And then she felt it. Tiny, almost invisible grooves etched into the back of the claw. She sat up, her heart pounding. Holding it close to the dying embers of the fire, she squinted. They were markings, symbols, but they weren't Apache. They were strange, angular, and felt ancient and wrong. A floorboard creaked outside the lodge. Celine froze. Her eyes darted to the entrance. A shadow fell across the hide flap. It was too large to be a man. Slowly, silently, the flap was pushed aside. Two points of light appeared in the darkness. Eyes. They glowed with a faint, sickly green light. The creature stepped into the lodge. It was a coyote, but impossibly large, its shoulders as high as a man's waist. Its fur was mangy and black, and its lips were pulled back in a silent snarl, revealing yellowed fangs. It wasn't looking at Nakai, who slept soundly by the door. It was looking directly at Celine. It took another step into the lodge, its glowing eyes filled with a malevolent intelligence. She wanted to scream, to wake Nakai, but a paralyzing fear had stolen her voice. The great beast lowered its head, sniffing the air. It took one more step, and then it stopped, its gaze fixed on the bear claw pendant in her hand. A low, guttural growl rumbled in its chest, a sound of pure hatred. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it backed away and vanished into the night. Celine sat there trembling for what felt like hours. It wasn't a dream. It was real. When the first light of dawn finally broke, she looked toward the entrance. Nakai was gone, and on the furs where he had slept, there was a single perfect black feather. In Apache lore, it was a symbol of death, a warning. Celine scrambled out of the lodge, the black feather clutched in her hand. The village was already stirring, but the atmosphere was wrong. People were gathered in tense, quiet groups, whispering. Then she saw Ayana running toward her, her face pale with terror. Celine, it's the children! Ayana cried, grabbing her arm. Two of the children, little Ayana and Tadwi, they're gone. They vanished from their lodge in the night. Celine's blood ran cold. The coyote, the unnatural beast from her lodge. Had it taken them? Before she could speak, Etil appeared, followed by several grim-faced warriors. She has done this, Etil screamed, pointing at Celine. The trickster spirit has claimed its price. Her dark magic has stolen our children. The crowd turned on Celine, their suspicion from the night before now ignited into open accusation. Witch! Someone shouted. She has cursed us, another cried. Nakai was nowhere to be seen. He had abandoned her, left her to face this alone. Silence! Chief Cochetta's voice boomed. He pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of authority. But when his eyes landed on Celine, there was no kindness in them, only a cold, hard judgment. There will be a trial, he announced, a trial by ordeal. The spirits themselves will decide your guilt. The trial was simple and brutal. Celine was to go to a place known as the Serpent's Breath, a network of caves in the foothills, riddled with venomous snakes and treacherous pits, a place from which no one had ever returned. Deep inside, a rare herb called the ghost lotus was said to grow. If you are innocent, Chief Cochetta declared, the spirits will guide you. You will return with the herb by sundown tomorrow. If you are guilty, the desert will claim you, and the curse on our tribe will be broken. It was a death sentence. As the warriors led her toward the foothills, forcing her away from the village, Celine felt a hand grab her arm. It was Nakai. He had appeared from nowhere. His face was grim. They would not listen to reason, he whispered, his voice urgent. He pressed a small, tightly wrapped leather pouch into her hand. Don't open this unless you have no other choice. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. The vision of the eagle was real, but I didn't tell them everything. In the vision, the eagle was fighting a shadow, a great darkness. That shadow is here now, Celine. It has been here for a long time. He glanced back toward the village, at the distant figure of the chief. Do not trust anyone, Nakai whispered, especially not the chief. Then he was gone, melting back into the rocks, leaving Celine with his cryptic warning, a mysterious pouch, and a death sentence to fulfill. The weight of betrayal and fear was crushing. The man who had chosen her, who had claimed to love her, had just confirmed her deepest fear. She was a pawn in a game she didn't understand, and the prize was her life. The entrance to the serpent's breath was a jagged maw in the side of the mountain, exhaling a cool, damp air that smelled of decay. Celine took a deep breath and plunged into the darkness, the jeers of the tribe still ringing in her ears. The caves were a nightmare labyrinth, tunnels twisted and turned, branching off into dead ends. The ground was slick with moisture, and more than once she heard the dry rattle of a cornered rattlesnake, forcing her to freeze, her heart pounding until the danger passed. She had to rely on every skill the Apache had taught her, the subtle shifts in air currents, the feel of the rock beneath her fingers, the way sound echoed. Hours passed. She was lost, alone, and terrified. The chief's words echoed in her mind. The desert will claim you. Deeper in, she found something that made her stop. An old abandoned campsite. A rusted pickaxe lay near a long-dead fire pit. Tacked to the wall was a tattered piece of canvas, a makeshift map. And next to it, scrawled onto the rock wall, were symbols. The same strange, angular symbols from the back of Nakai's bear claw. Her blood ran cold. Someone else had been here. Someone who knew about the pendant. Tucked into a crevice, she found a leather-bound journal. It was written in English. The pages were brittle. The ink faded. It belonged to a prospector named Silas, dated 30 years prior. At first, the entries were normal, full of hope about striking silver. But the tone quickly grew paranoid, frantic. He wrote about the cave not being empty. He felt a presence, a darkness that whispered to him in his sleep, promising him power, promising him wealth. All it asked for in return was a small favor. It wanted him to prepare a vessel, a ritual site. For a child the spirits would one day deliver to the mountain. A child with hair of the sun and eyes of the summer sky. Celine felt the air leave her lungs. It was her. The entity in this cave had been waiting for her. For 30 years, the last few pages of the journal had been violently torn out. A pebble skittered down a nearby tunnel. Celine wasn't alone. She flattened herself against the rock wall, peering into the oppressive darkness. A faint light appeared, growing closer. A torch. A figure emerged from the tunnel. It was Itil. Celine's mind reeled. Had she been sent to finish the job? To make sure Celine never came back? But the look on Itil's face wasn't anger. It was stark terror. They sent me, Itil whispered, her voice trembling. The chief's men. They said if you found something, I was to make sure it stayed buried. Along with you. Before Celine could react, a deep rumbling sound echoed from the entrance of the cave. It grew into a deafening roar. The ground shook violently. Itil screamed as the tunnel behind her collapsed, a torrent of rock and dust sealing them in. They were trapped, buried alive, together. The dust settled into a thick, choking silence. The only light came from Itil's sputtering torch. It was no accident, Itil choked out, her face pale in the flickering light. They did this. They sealed us in. Panic gave way to a cold, hard reality. They were trapped, deep inside a mountain that wanted Celine dead, with a finite amount of air and no way out. The initial hostility between them evaporated, replaced by the grim necessity of survival. We have to find another way, Celine said, her voice steady despite the terror coiling in her gut. The prospector lived down here. There must be air shafts, other passages. For hours they searched, their alliance fragile but real. Itil, who knew the mountains like the back of her hand, helped navigate, while Celine, with her strange connection to the place, seemed to sense which tunnels were safe and which were dead ends. It was in a small, hidden chamber, far from the main passages, that they found it. A crude altar of stacked stones. And on the altar, a small, grotesque doll made of corn husks and twigs. A lock of bright golden hair was tied to its head. Celine's hair. Surrounding the doll were more of the strange symbols, painted on the rock in what looked like dried blood. It was a curse, a binding ritual. Idle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I have seen these before, she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. Small ones, hidden, painted on the backs of lodges, on the water skins. What are they? Celine asked. A sickness, Edel said. A curse that feeds on weakness and doubt. It's meant to turn the tribe against itself, to drain its strength. The shaman spoke of it in legends, an old magic. Forbidden, it's not Apache. The failed hunts, the strange illnesses, the growing sense of despair in the tribe. It wasn't a curse Celine had brought. It was a poison being fed to them. And the doll, with her hair, was the focal point. The ritual was using her, the outsider, the object of their suspicion, as a conduit to poison the entire tribe. Whoever is doing this, Celine said, her voice grim, is one of us. They finally found it behind a loose rock wall, a narrow chimney, barely wide enough to squeeze through, leading straight up. It was a desperate, terrifying climb into blackness, but it was their only chance. After what felt like an eternity of scraping against rough stone, Celine saw it, a faint circle of gray light, the surface. She pulled herself over the edge, gasping in the cool night air, and turned to help Itil. A figure was standing there, silhouetted against the moon, waiting for them. It wasn't one of the warriors. It wasn't an elder. It was Chief Cochetta. And in the moonlight, Celine could see his eyes. They glowed with the same sickly, unnatural green light as the coyote from the lodge. I am so disappointed in you, Itil, the chief said, his voice calm, but utterly devoid of warmth. Your task was simple. The truth crashed down on Celine with the force of a physical blow. The man who had saved her, the man who had raised her, he was the source of the poison. He was the shadow Nakai had warned her about. You, Itil breathed, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. Uncle? Why? Cochetta laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Power, my dear niece. True power, the kind our ancestors only dreamed of. He had found the prospector's journal years ago, after the man had died. He had found the altar, and he had made a pact with the ancient entity in the mountain. The entity gave him influence, made his words seem wise, helped him consolidate his rule. But the entity was growing hungry. It needed more than just influence. It needed a host, a body to inhabit. It chose her, Cochetta said, gesturing to Celine. From the moment my scouts found her, so pure, so empty, a perfect vessel, an outsider no one would miss. I protected her, raised her, kept her on the edges, weak and isolated, waiting for the right moment to complete the ritual. Nakai, Celine whispered, his choice. Your warrior ruined everything, Cochetta snarled, his composure cracking. By choosing you, by bringing you into the heart of the tribe, he gave you an anchor. He gave you strength. He started a war he cannot possibly comprehend. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The bear claw pendant wasn't a lover's gift. It was a ward of protection. The strange markings were part of an ancient defense against this very entity. Nakai hadn't abandoned her. He had forced this trial, sent her to the one place she could find the truth, because he couldn't accuse his own chief without starting a civil war. And now, Cochetta said, taking a step forward, his body seeming to crackle with dark energy, I will simply take back what is mine. He lunged. He moved with an unnatural speed, his hands like claws. Itil, a trained warrior, barely had time to react, drawing her knife to defend herself. But Cochetta swatted her aside like a fly. He was impossibly strong. The shadow entity was flowing through him. He grabbed Celine by the throat, lifting her off the ground. Her feet dangled, useless. Black spots danced in her vision. The children, he hissed, his face close to hers, his breath smelling of dust and graves. They were the perfect sacrifice to complete the ritual. A shame you had to interfere. He had been the one to take them. He had been planning to kill them. Suddenly an arrow whistled through the air. embedding itself in Cochetta's shoulder. He roared in pain and fury, dropping Celine. Nakai stepped out of the darkness, his bow still raised, his face a grim mask of war. Behind him were a dozen warriors, their own weapons drawn. "Your reign is over, Cochetta," Nakai said, his voice like cold steel. But on the other side of the clearing, more warriors appeared, loyal to their chief. They drew their own bows, their faces torn between allegiance and the horrifying truth of what they were seeing. The tribe was broken, and under the cold desert moon, the battle for the soul of the Apache began. The clearing erupted into chaos. Arrows flew. The crack of war clubs hitting shields echoed off the rocks. It was a brutal, heartbreaking civil war, brother fighting brother. Cochetta, fueled by the shadow entity, was a whirlwind of destruction. The arrow in his shoulder seemed to cause him no pain. He fought with the strength of 10 men, his glowing green eyes burning with madness. Celine watched in horror as the conflict raged. The entity wasn't just empowering Cochetta, it was feeding on the violence. Every blow, every cry of pain made the shadows around the chief grow darker, stronger. "We can't beat him like this," Celine yelled to Nakai over the din of battle. "Fighting him is making him more powerful." She remembered the prospector's journal. The entity fed on fear, on doubt, on division. The curse on the doll had been designed to create suspicion. This battle was the ultimate feast. Then she remembered Nakai's cryptic gift, the leather pouch. She ripped it open. Inside wasn't a weapon or a tool. It was a handful of dried, crushed petals. The ghost lotus, the herb from the cave. It wasn't a test of her innocence. It was the key. In Apache lore, the ghost lotus didn't heal the body. It cleared the mind. It broke illusions and revealed truth. The curse had to be broken at its source, not Cochetta, but the prejudice that had allowed the curse to take root. The tribe's belief that she, the outsider, was the source of their problems. She had to prove them wrong, not with courage in battle, but with an act of impossible unity. "Itil!" Celine shouted, grabbing the other woman's arm. "The songs! The song from the mating ceremony! The song of unity!" Edel stared at her, her face streaked with dirt and blood, but she understood. While Nakai and his warriors fought a desperate holding action against the possessed chief, Edel gathered the women at the edge of the clearing. Their voices rose, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. A powerful, ancient chant that spoke of one tribe, one heart, one spirit. The sound cut through the chaos of battle, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Celine took a deep breath, clutching the ghost lotus petals, and she started walking. She walked away from the protection of Nakai's warriors. She walked past the fighting. She walked straight toward the monstrous, raging form of Chief Cochetta. He saw her coming and laughed, a horrible grating sound. "The little lamb walks to the slaughter." She didn't flinch. She kept walking until she was standing right in front of him. The women's songs swelled around them. She didn't raise a weapon. She didn't try to fight. She looked past the glowing eyes, past the monster, and tried to see the man who had found a terrified little girl in the desert and brought her home. "I forgive you," she said, her voice clear and strong. Cochetta froze, a look of confusion on his face. "You saved my life," Celine continued, her voice filled with an empathy she didn't know she possessed. "You gave me a family. The darkness twisted you, but that kindness was real. I choose to remember the man, not the monster." She held out her hand, the ghost lotus petals resting on her palm. "Come back to us." Her words, powered by the women's song of unity, were a force the entity couldn't comprehend. Forgiveness, acceptance, unity. It was pure poison to a creature that fed on division and hate. It was a blast of pure light against absolute darkness. The shadow entity recoiled. A shriek, not from Cochetta's mouth but from the air around him, tore through the night. The green light in his eyes flickered violently. He clutched his head, roaring in agony as the darkness was violently ripped away from him. He collapsed to the ground, the shadows receding, leaving behind nothing but a broken old man, gasping for breath in the sudden, ringing silence. The fighting stopped. Warriors on both sides lowered their weapons, staring in stunned disbelief. The battle was over. Cochetta lay on the ground, the dark power gone, leaving him frail and defeated. Justice had to be served, but Nakai and Selene knew that more bloodshed would only weaken the tribe further. Mercy, they decided, was the only way to truly heal. Cochetta was not executed. He was exiled, sentenced to live alone at the entrance to the serpent's breath, to guard the site of his corruption and ensure the evil never seeped out again. It was a penance, a lonely vigil to reclaim the honor he had lost. In the aftermath, the tribe had to be rebuilt. With Cochetta gone, they needed a new leader. And in a unanimous decision by the council, they chose the woman who had faced betrayal and found the strength to unite them. They chose Etil. She accepted, her past pride and jealousy burned away, replaced by a humble wisdom forged in terror and reconciliation. Selene was no longer the outsider. She was a spiritual hero, the woman who had walked into the heart of the darkness and redeemed her people not with a weapon, but with forgiveness. She and Nakai were finally truly united, their bonds sealed not by a ceremony, but by a war for their very souls. As the weeks passed and the tribe began to heal, Selene realized something had changed within her. A subtle shift she had at first dismissed as the aftershock of the battle. She was pregnant. This child would be different. It would not be a mere bridge between two worlds. It would be a guardian, born of a great struggle, carrying the blood of a warrior who fought the darkness and a mother who had conquered it with light. Its birthright would be the story of a tribe that had been broken by prejudice and saved by unity. 6 months later, Selene held her newborn son. He had his father's strong features and her own determined green eyes. As Nakai looked at his child, the stoic warrior's face was transformed by pure, unfiltered awe. "What will we call him?" Selene asked. Nakai didn't hesitate. "Ashki," he said, the Apache word for boy. But not just any boy. The boy who reminds us that our greatest strength is not in our blood, but in our heart. Selene looked down at little Ashki and saw the future. He would never have to question where he belonged. His parents had fought a war to give him that certainty. The desert wind whispered through their lodge, carrying not the scent of fear and doubt, but the promise of a new beginning. Selene smiled. She finally understood. Her journey hadn't been about finding a home. It had been about becoming one. In choosing her, Nakai hadn't just saved her from the shadows. He had given her a destiny. And in accepting it, she had saved them all. So, what do you think? Was Nakai's initial choice an act of love or a calculated strategic move in a war he already knew was coming? He sent Selene into that cave, knowing she could die, but also knowing it was the only way for her to uncover the truth. Does that make him a hero or something more complicated? And let's talk about Etil. Her transformation from a bitter rival into the tribe's new chief is incredible. Would you have been able to forgive the person who took everything from you and then fight alongside them to save the very people who witnessed your humiliation? That kind of strength is rare. But the biggest question that haunts me is this: was the entity in the mountain truly defeated, or is it just sleeping, waiting? Cochetta is its guardian now, but he's just a man. What happens when he's gone? It makes you think about the darkness we all face. Sometimes we defeat it, but sometimes we just learn to live with it and to guard against it. If this story of love, betrayal, and the fight for the soul of a people resonated with you, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe and join our storytelling family. Because every story is a journey, and we all deserve to find out where we truly belong.